everyone. Welcome to HappyMeCareer Coaching Initiatives, episode number 17. And today's topic is going to be exciting because it really resonates what Happy Me Career is all about. And we are going to talk about injecting coaching lifestyle with who? With Raymond Thomas. Hi, Raymond. Hi,
Hi,
Raymond. Thank you for
Mavis.
being here with us.
Oh, you're
Yes.
welcome. You're welcome. Well, first of all, congratulations on your episode 17 of Happy Me Career Coaching Initiatives.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Cool. Thank you so much, Raymond. Now, I have to be honest with everyone about this Happy Me career coaching initiatives. My intention to start this initiative is to demyth the belief that coaching is a bonus, a good to have, or most view it as luxury commodity, where many would have thought that coaching is meant for C-suite, high flyer leaders, sports athletes, God knows who. Raymond and I have been in conversations of such, and we share the same notions that one can still go through coaching through skilled, experienced coaching conversations. Now, Raymond has been the founder of Annabelle, brings with him over 20 years of experience with highly diverse background. And you know what? He has that propensity to initiate the positive changes to people and organization, to drive innovations and enable them to thrive in this future economy. And best of all, he's an adjunct lecturer in Nanyang Technological University, a coach himself to high-powered leaders and individuals, developing and conducting soft skills programs to organizations. Now, let me maybe just cut short and let Raymond do the talking. And this is what the live show is about, where we share conversations, right? Now, Raymond, would you like to do us the honors to share with us, more about yourself, your experience of organizational working culture, or what are you up to right now?
Thanks a lot, Mavis. Thank you for having me on your show, and it's really an honor to be here with you and the audience who are sitting out there and listening to you and listening to me. It's a great honor for me. But just a little bit about myself. I just wanted to make one little correction, and I do apologize for not correcting it earlier when I was reading the scripts. But I've been in corporate for about 20 years, and I've been on my own for about another 12 years. So believe it or not, the total number right now is coming up to about 32 years. That's slightly over 3 decades. Can you imagine? And
Wow.
I'm not talking about my age, but that's the kind of experience that I'm talking about. But just a little bit about myself, and why I'm so much into coaching itself. But I've been in corporate for about the 20 years, and I've been fortunate enough since the day I graduated. I graduated, came out of school. I got absorbed into working for American multinationals. And one of the good things that I have taken away uh, by working for them is the fact that they are amazing coaches in many different ways, in many different levels. And as most of you, or most as what you would know, is coaching started off probably a lot in the US, and it was formalized into a system, and it was used in the most effective way to help people accomplish their tasks, their goals, their objectives, and even discover potential of themselves. And subtly or not, Mavis, this is what I grew up with. I never really understood, and I was kind of like really frustrated when I was going through my corporate career, that that I get asked all these questions, and it's like, hey, you're asking me the question. Don't you guys know the answer yourself? So, subtly, it was the coaching methodology that was instilled in me, and how they actually wanted me to share with them what I felt would be something that really works. Stayed in corporate for about 2 decades, and then back in 2008, I stepped out of corporate, and I said, what would I like to do? And I was coaxed into coming in and starting my own business. And I started off running, training business. I started off running training business for about 3 to 6 years before I discovered that, training alone is not enough. I felt that there was a greater necessity for consulting and trying to understand the kind of problems that clients have, and putting together some kind of a facilitation system, some kind of a coaching system that helped to unleash people within the organization, either be it from a leadership perspective, from a people management perspective, or even from a productivity perspective. And lo and behold, history. I'm still in Enable right now, which is really great, and I'm enjoying every bit of it.
Wow. 20 years on corporate and 12 years on your own. No.
Yes.
And perhaps you could share with us how, coaching has come about, the difference between in corporate and when you come out and when you're doing on this coaching as you deliver workshops for organizations, what was the difference, have you noticed?
I think the whole process of coaching has been formalized a little bit more, so that there's more structure. There are more proven methodologies that are used to help people reflect, realize, be aware, and even introspect in terms of who they are, and look for answers themselves. So I guess when I was in corporate, there wasn't much of a structure. I mean, we talk about grow model, right? I don't think there was a whole element of grow model. It's like, why do you do this? Why do you do that? Right? And that was the question. The question was always why? And I think it kind of like agitated me every time someone would ask me the why question. And today, through formalization, I think you're very familiar with this, Mavis, but the why question can have pros and cons in terms of how it's asked and when you ask it. And right now, as a coach, I'm very sensitive how I use the why question. Rather than consider using why in a repetitive way, I create a little bit more context in how questions are actually formed. So to answer your question, I think what's happened to coaching is coaching has become a little bit more formalized as opposed to what it was previously. There's more structure right now, and there are more opportunities to be sensitive towards the needs of the coachee that you want to develop, and probably even give more opportunity for them to be able to articulate their strengths and also their potential. So that's what I think is the change that has happened over the years itself.
Right. Okay. Now, Raymond, we have Daryl and James Campbell, with us here. And Daryl asks, but why, bro? So that brings me to a questions to you, Raymond, is that if you say that why has the pros and cons, maybe can you give us an example why asking the why question can be an advantage or a good thing, or asking a why in what situation can be not a good thing?
Sure. Well, one of the thing is, I think if the question why is used on a repetitive basis, it could drive some level of agitation towards the individual, in terms of how they would revert to an answer. For instance, I'll give you an example. I still remember when I was a young engineer, and my boss would ask me why, and then I'll give him an answer, and he goes back again and says why, and I'll give him an answer, and again he goes why, and I like look at him and say, what do you mean why? Haven't I been giving you the answer itself? I think what we do right now is we tend to be more sensitive, we tend to be more empathic, and we tend to try to create a little bit more context around the reason, why we are asking the why question. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but rather than just ask why question, it's facilitating how the why question comes about, so it feeds into that individual, and the individual understands the context in the way the question is being framed, and they get to think a little bit more before they can even provide an effective answer.
Right. So I believe that's what we have on the floor, Ian. Hi, Johnny. Well, Ian has just said something about, yes, he agrees that why becomes a good thing and a bad thing in certain contexts. And you were saying that why has become a stigma at times. You know, there's so much conversation is going around the floor. And yeah, he's asking, he starts to worry when his kids asking why. And that's also the same thing, when my kids asking me why mommy, why, that's when we kind
Yeah.
of get very framed in mind, right? So now, Raymond, perhaps can you maybe share with us a little bit more as we go along when we talk about why, right? But as you say that, coaching has become more formalized and more
Mm,
structured way.
mm,
So we've been hearing, this month, more and more organizations adopting coaching into the working culture.
yes.
And I would feel that maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, because coaching is a reflective questioning for someone to seek their own answer, as compared, to traditional coaching where it's a very directive, instructional based, right? How has the coaching or working culture evolved so far to adopt coaching?
Mm.
Maybe
I think
share with
that's
us.
a Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question, Mavis, because we're talking about the working culture itself, and I feel that depending on individuals, depending on the organization, I feel that certain organizations are still struggling to transition the whole working culture, and even adopting a working culture, coaching culture, where people are coached to productivity, who are coached towards performance itself. I think it's while it's a corporate cultural element, but I think there is also a little bit of that Asian cultures, in the way that we want to coach individuals. I think organizations are aware that coaching is important. They are aware that coaching is powerful tool, but many individuals still need to reflect in terms of how do they ask questions, how do they ask effective questions, and how to get people to probably think a little bit more. I'll give you an example. In quite a number of organizations, I feel the solutions are still very prescriptive. Solutions tend to be very instructive, as opposed to other organizations where leaders would sit down with people and kind of like have a conversation like this. They do a check-in, they have a conversation like this, but through that conversation, they ask questions to understand the origins or the source of why certain individuals feel a certain way, or why certain individuals perceive things in a certain way. And it takes a lot of effort to actually think about it, Davis, right? So sometimes I've seen leaders. What I've seen for leaders is sometimes leaders don't have the most effective skills to ask questions, right? They are uncertain how to ask effective questions. I think that's one of the things. The other thing that I also find a challenge for some organization is leaders tend to be a little bit more tactical in their approach, and from a tacticality perspective, they want to dive straight into a solution, as opposed to trying to coach the person, coach the individual, or the employee or the team member to come out with a solution themselves. So I think that the whole coaching culture and the way it's evolving in the organization is it's still not straightforward, and people still feel uncomfortable coaching other individuals. I ran a session a couple of weeks ago that some of them were saying, yeah, I'm a leader, I've got a team, but you know what? I don't have confidence of coaching people. I've got more confidence instructing people what to do, and I've got lesser of a confidence trying to help them find their own results and their own outcome. So you realize that the coaching culture is no longer about me, but the coaching culture is about the other person coming out with a solution. So that, those are some of the struggles that organizations are actually facing in terms of moving towards a coaching culture in the work environment.
Right. So perhaps let us actually deep dive a little bit of what you've just talked about: effective conversations, coaching conversations, as well as confidence. Right. Let's do it one by one. Now, when you talk about having the skills to conduct an effective coaching conversations, then, what is effective? Because earlier you have just mentioned about how the leaders can actually think about the other parties, the one that they are coaching, in their perspectives, etc. So when that comes to mind, hidden agendas or perhaps the barriers of being vulnerable, because coaching is all about letting your guard down and having to deep dive a little bit more reflective questionings, right? So does that mean that the effectiveness will be compromised if someone is not willing to let the guard down? Or am I making some sense out of this?
Yeah, no, you are totally making sense, and I think we tend to be rather sensitive about our own pride and our own ego, right? That we tend to guard it a little bit more than to let our guard down or be more vulnerable with people in terms of talking through issues. So rather than bring unwanted topics up to the surface and being able to talk about it, we tend to make assumptions, suppress it, and we want to just keep moving forward, right? And you're absolutely correct. How effective a coaching relationship, how effective a coaching conversation can be, it really depends on that two individuals who are sitting across the table or who are sitting right next to each other and trying to collaboratively co-create solutions that would help them address the problem that they're working on, right? So I think you're absolutely correct that the effectiveness is determined on the fact that if both of them are comfortable and both of them are feeling safe in carrying out that conversation itself. I think that's a very big element in terms of how people can be a little bit more guarded, defensive in what they want to say or how they want to say it or how much they want to reveal, how much they want to protect themselves, they want to protect their job, that kind of thing. So you're absolutely correct. I think coaching doesn't happen until two people are able to comfortably come face to face and say, okay, this is a problem. We have to address it, no matter how ugly this is going to be. But let's raise it up. Let's talk about it. We may have a solution. We may not have a solution. At least at the end of the day, we are progressing closer towards the solution. We may not have a solution. So I think you're absolutely correct. It's the effectiveness is dependent on that two individual who's having that conversation itself.
So then in that case, that brings us to the next point that you've just pointed out about confidence, right? So does that mean that, if we can't strike an effectiveness in the conversations, that's when the confidence level of the leaders or the individuals, they are not confident to coach or get into coaching conversations?
Right. No, and you're absolutely correct. But that's where vulnerability comes in. You know what? I haven't coached before. And you're the first person I'm coaching. That kind of thing, right? And I'm going to make some mistakes, but stay with me. All right, I appreciate if you could stay with me, and then we could do kind of like a little wrap up at the end, a debrief at the end, and then you can tell me whether you felt comfortable with the outcome of this session, or if you did not, please let me know so that I can also improve. So it's coming from a space of authenticity. I think that's one thing. It's coming from a space of being curious and the willingness to be open to each other, that we are working towards a problem, and I'm not working on you and you're not working on me, that we are trying to judge each other, we are trying to find fault with each other. That's not the purpose in terms of having coaching conversations, right? The purpose of having coaching conversations is addressing a problem that's on the table. I think that's the mindset that leaders need to go into a conversation. I feel that's really important.
Right. Okay. Okay. So when you say a coaching mindset that a leader should get, and that brings me to a topic where, as you know, Happy Me Career Coaching talk shows, we have touched on organizations, how can they adopt coaching. And in the last episode, we have Sharon Seeds, mentioned about getting the C levels to buy in before it can cascade down. Now, I think most importantly is when you touch on leaders getting to start by getting coaching conversations in going in small groups too. So, what are your thoughts, like how they can get into such coaching conversations?
Right. So you're bringing. I think Sharon brought up a really good point in terms of getting the C-suite leaders to buy in, and it's transitioning to a coaching culture is pretty much a top-down approach in terms of having leaders to take on additional responsibility apart from their performance, apart from their KPIs and everything, but this time using conversations with people, and trying to find out what is it that they're trying to accomplish, what potential they have, what talents do they have, what else do they need to develop on before they can become even better. So having that small group, I think it's really powerful, and we have done quite a number of sessions where we work in small groups where there's peer support. All right, so there is peer support. So apart from the fact that I'm coming in as a coach and giving individual feedback, but getting people to work together so that when we are not there, they could sit down, they could go away, have coaching conversations, and then they could come back again and share with each other if the tools worked for them or the tools did not work for them. So I think the peer coaching model, which is something that we are trying to develop, the peer coaching model is also another really powerful model in terms of how to develop coaches within the organization. And we have done this so far for a C-1, C-2 level, where we are getting the senior executives, apart from working on their day-to-day KPIs, they have to clock in number of hours in terms of coaching, and they work within their peer groups, or what we call masterminds or community or practices within the organization, and they give each other support, they give each other confidence, they give each other feedback, right? I think these are all different things that's really very important to give them that support that's needed. Apart from that, Mavis, I think what they need is they also need tools. They need to have tools. They need to have a toolbox. They need to have a toolkit, which would allow them to revert back and consider tools that they have and use that as part of their questioning process, as part of their listening process, so that they continue to develop those skills to become more effective as a coach. So I think having small groups are really important. I really think that's really important. And at the same time, they check in with probably external coaches on maybe a monthly basis or once a quarter basis to kind of like talk about how they're feeling, and what additional tools do they have, or maybe there are certain scenarios that they're not sure how to handle, and they bring it up to us, and then we brainstorm, we come up with ideas. I'm not going to give them a direct solution, but we all become sounding boards for each other. The whole goal is the solutions and the outcomes reside within that community, within that small group of coaches. I think that's the direction that we are moving towards. We want them to build that coaching culture within the organization culture. I think that's a really important thing for many organizations.
Right. That's thanks for sharing that about having to build that small community or that community of best practices within the organizations, and peer supports really help. I mean, in terms like we've just realized, COVID, is something that we realize community is so strong that we need it with one another.
Mm,
Now,
mm,
let us come back to a little bit of where our topic is for today. It's about injecting coaching conversations into lifestyle. So, if all of us spend so much time at work, probably I would assume everyone would know that remote working at home, okay, we are practically spending before COVID, we are just spending about probably 50%. I think it has increased to 80%, you know,
yeah,
based on
yeah.
remote working. So, being that right, how can we actually use all the more injecting? How can we inject all the more coaching into our lifestyle? Is that
Mm.
possible?
Yeah, it is possible, provided people are held accountable for it. Like, how
Mm.
many hours are you clocking? This is a plugin for ICF, and this is one of the reasons why ICF exists, right? In terms of allowing individuals to create their own development plan to move towards ACC and PCC and MCC. So I think these kind of systems actually become very helpful because it allows individual to achieve some level of mastery, right? So using coaching in lifestyle, I think that's still very, very possible, even though we are working from home. However, I want to say a lot of the coaching sessions where I run, I do insist that I should be able to look at you. I should be able to have some level of eye contact. I should be able to look at your facial expressions. I think earlier on, we used to have a lot of challenges in terms of people being too camera shy, don't want to turn on their cameras and all that kind of thing. But I think these are all important components that help to facilitate a more a more effective coaching session. I think that's really important, right? So if you want to keep doing coaching through virtually, I think it's still really important that we have this video that allows me to look at what you're doing, to look at how you're saying it. I mean, these are all really important components. So I think the coaching lifestyle. I don't know about you, Mavis, and maybe this is a question you can think about, but I use coaching in any conversations that I have with friends. But I don't blatantly tell people, Mavis, I'm going to start coaching you. No. But I just pay attention to what you're saying, and I write on those questions to. I'm sorry, I write on what you're saying to ask you questions, right? And that is itself a form of coaching that happens. It's a very subtle way to coach, but it gets people to think a little bit more before they even come up with an answer that makes sense to them.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Raymond. And that forms part and parcel. Now we have here on board Sir Sim is who I am talking about just now. I've mentioned to you someone from coming in at 11 p.m. at wherever he is, right? Sir Sim, we have Meme, we have Anjan. Hi, everyone. I mean, today's topic is about injecting coaching into lifestyle, right? Okay. So feel free, please drop us questions and we'll answer it along the way. There's no Q&A sessions after these sessions. We'll wrap up on the clock of 9 p.m. Okay. So just feel free to give us a tinkle of your questions. Now, coming back to your questions, Raymond, I truly resonates very well. Okay, of what you mean is that you write on people's, listen to what they say and you write on what they say to ask the questions because it comes. I have to always apologize to people and tell them that hey, I'm so sorry, but yeah, this is an innate coaching. I would say innate coaching ability of myself that I always listen and I kind of curious, why is this so?
Mm,
And I start to ask, and I start to, naturally the coaching questions or coaching sessions just comes about. And then at the end of it, of course I wouldn't say, hey, I'm doing coaching, but what I actually told them at the end of it was, do you know we've just gone through a coaching session?
mm, mm.
Right.
That's such a powerful way to bring that whole point of awareness out there to people, because then people kind of like, oh, and they didn't even realize that they've gone through some kind of a coaching, right? And they feel good maybe with the response that they have to share with you. I'm talking about this, Mavis. This morning, I met with someone, and it's the first time I'm meeting that individual. But I kind of like, just out of blues, I asked them, and they were telling me a lot of things. And I said, why do you wake up every morning, right? And even simple questions like that sometimes takes people aback to have to think about that answer before they can even formulate and share with you why they get up every morning. And it's interesting, you could see their eyes rolling up and down, right? And that's because they're thinking, they're looking at their brain, and they're trying to find answers, just through their eyes, movement of their eyes itself. But you're absolutely correct. I think what you touched on, which a very important thing, is, do we have the most effective listening skills? Because if you have the effective listening skills, you could use what others are saying, to frame the next question and to take them to another level. I think progressively taking people to smaller steps, through smaller steps, helps them to discover a little bit more about themselves.
Right. And okay, so what happens is that you've just touched on another interesting point, Raymond. Okay, it's about how how are we actively listening, right? And how are we going to have the intention to progress the conversations on smaller steps? So
Mm,
many a times I feel that coaching conversations can come in if the intention of the individuals have the intention to help the other parties at the end of the table to progress. And that basically boils down to curiosity, right? Why is this so? Why? And it kind of gets frustrating. Like, you see them circling around a problem, and you're trying to tell them that, hey, why are you circling around that problem? And you're trying to make them move forward. So about framing the mindsets, how then can you frame that mindset without telling them?
mm. Yeah, that's a great question, and I do apologize. When you were talking, my mind was going back to, one other point that was really important. This morning when I met with this individual, my the first thing was, I asked myself, why am I meeting this individual? I think it's really important to identify the purpose itself. What is the purpose? Was I there to sell my services? Was I there to address a problem? Was I there to find out about that individual? I think it's really important for us to define what is that purpose, that overarching purpose of meeting with that individual, because that's going to define and that's going to determine the outcome of that conversation,
Mm.
right? And that's the very first step. Okay, if both of us were meeting this morning, and if my intention was to sell you my coaching services, then guess what, I'll be listening out to everything that you say, and hopefully at the end of it you're going to say, okay, I would like you to coach. You're the guy who's going to coach me, right? So it really depends on what is the purpose of that conversation. And it very interestingly enough, Mavis, this morning when we started, we actually clarified. When we sat at the table, we said, okay, yeah, we haven't met. This is the first time for us to meet. And we said, we are just curious, what do you do for a business? What do I do for a business? And that the conversation just went around that itself. So it's kind of like it's a conversation, but it's kind of like a coaching conversation, which is part of that lifestyle conversation, if you know what I mean. So
Yes.
it's a really powerful thing. So I think the whole purpose is really making sure there's congruence in terms of the purpose of why we are there, why both of us are there, right? And here's the thing, Mavis, if you are here for one reason, I'm here for a totally different reason, then it's going to be one of the most frustrating conversations. And I don't think there's going to be an opportunity to be curious because we would be in a very competitive mode because I've got a separate agenda, the other person's got a different agenda. There is no convergence, but more probably there's divergence to the whole conversation itself. I'm not sure if I'm making sense to you, but I think what I'm trying to say, the purpose is always really important. Even before you start talking about things.
Yes, absolutely. It's about the alignment of where you're coming from, right? So at the end of the day, is you guys are talking the same lingo, the same topics of interest. So
Right.
we have on the floor, just like answer a few questions on the floor. James was asking me, why do you need to feel the need to apologize, Ms. Bell? Guess what? When I do coaching, and I unknowingly do coaching, and without seeking a permission, it's kind of, I feel probably I didn't seek enough coaching agreement or permissions, right? Do you feel that way, Raymond?
I call this a PS syndrome.
Oh, what is a PS syndrome?
I say syndrome. That's what it is. We are so paise. We are such a paise culture that we want to apologize for everything. And I want to thank James for bringing that up because I think we need to step away from apologizing for everything that we didn't do well, right? And
Mm.
look at how to convert that. And this is not targeted at you, Mavis, but we need to convert that to probably ask permission. And I noticed that in my conversation this morning, I would ask permission, like I would ask, like, do you mind if I ask you this question? That kind of thing. So, do you mind if I ask you this question? And then the person says yes, and then you move on and you ask the question and you summarize. It's interesting that you say that, but it brings me to a mental model that I use from my coaching school, and that's what I learned, and that is to create context, ask permission, and then go question, summary. When I change the topic, I ask permission again, right? I change the context, I ask the permission, and if the person gives permission, then I go question, summary, question, summary. So every time, here's the thing, our brain doesn't feel comfortable when we switch channels in an ad hoc basis. So to transition our brain from one context to another context, it is always good to tell the other person, I want to talk about this right now. Is that okay? And the guy says, okay. And then you move into the question. So in other words, you are engaging the brain, you are getting that coaching permission, and then you are moving into a space that is comfortable for both individuals itself. And I think that's a huge mental model that I think it's a really powerful thing for us to keep in mind.
Yeah, for coaches, for coaches like us, that we have to also keep in mind, and for anyone who wants to use, injecting coaching into their conversations, they have to be mindful about seeking that comfortable zone, or seeking an agreement or permission to be intruding into someone else's space, right? Yeah, I mean, thanks, James. He is complimenting spot on Raymond. It almost feels like Mavis is apologizing for being a great coach. I mean, yeah. Well, Ian, if you're still there, Ian has a question, Raymond.
Sure.
Ian is asking, what are the 3 questions you love to ask in your coaching sessions?
Wow. That's a really powerful question, man. That's a really powerful question. I think the very first question I like asking people is always asking them to tell me more. right? So I think the first one is tell me more, and being in a more, I put myself in a curious space. So maybe it's, I don't ask why, but I say, tell me more. All right. So I think that's a softer way in terms of how we lead people in a certain direction. And then we summarize what they're saying, and then we move in the next direction. The first question, tell me more. I think that's a really important thing. The second question that I always like asking individuals is, give me an example. All right, give me an example. And the example is evidential to whether the individual understands what they're trying to describe, or they have had enough time and space to analyze the problem in which they are in. Right. So I think that's the second one, is always looking for examples. And especially when it's not clear. And tell you what, maybe sometimes even if it's clear, I still ask for examples. The reason for that is for validation purposes as a coach, just to validate what the person is saying, so that I can kind of like bingo on the person itself. Um, the third question, which I really like, Mavis, or Ian, the third question that I always use is, I ask, if this situation was to be rectified, what would the end result look like?
Hmm.
So create that element of envisioning for the individual, so that they can envision and they can already see what the end result is going to look like if they solve the problem. And you know what? If they like the space that the end result is going to create for them, they are more determined, they are fired up to want to move in that direction. So these are the three questions I think would be most powerful for me. Tell me more is one. The second one is asking for example, and the third one, what would the end result look like to the coachee that I'm working with? I hope that helps, Ian.
Right. Ian say is so brilliant, non-confrontational, and really practical. And he thank you, Raymond. Now, Raymond, let me add on to that. Three questions is, from my coaching sessions, I like to ask, what else? So what? And I mean, is that very confrontational? So what? And then the last one is, like it or not, this will happen, And I bring them out of the context and I say, please envision yourself. You are not who you are now. Let's take you out of the box and see. So what happens? What is happening here? What are we looking at?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
No,
these are
that's
three questions.
that's a powerful technique. It's actually called Rolf's model, ROLFE's model, and he talks about three things. He talks about the what, now, so what, now what, and it's kind of like a filter. Maybe it's just like the way you said it. It's just a filter to help people go through in terms of what is really important, what to
Mhm.
focus on, and when you got what you want to focus on, what is your next step of action that you want to take on itself. So yeah, that great questions. I like that.
Wow, great. So, three and three, that makes six questions for any of you out there that you can inject into your normal conversations, and you can start asking your friends, okay, so what are we doing here? What else? Now, we have Tony. Hi, Tony. Tony is saying, coaching lifestyle. How do we bring coaching skills like active listening, separate the issue from a person, be curious, not telling, etc., to our daily conversation, and not just in a coaching session? So he's asking, how do we bring coaching skills like active listening? We separate the issue out from a person, we be curious, and still not telling the person, in our daily conversations, not in coaching session. So how do we do that, Raymond? Shall we brainstorm a little?
Yeah, we should actually brainstorm a little bit. I think let's make a fundamental assumption here, and that is the coaching is happening in an environment that is conducive to the session. All right. So if you talk about that, then we're only talking about two individuals. So I think Tony brings up a point about listening. I totally agree that listening is going to be a really powerful tool to help both individuals to move in a certain direction itself. Would you agree with that, Mavis?
Yes, definitely. So for me, it's about immersing into the person's world.
Mm. How do you think we can immerse into the person's world?
Well, for me, if let's say, for example, let's say in a context of us in a friend setting, you and your best
Mm.
friend or you and your friend in a coffee session. So would you be present with your friend in a coffee session and talk just about, to two of you methods? Or would you be wondering in your brain and say, okay, what's next? Am I talking about what's next? What's next? So I
Right.
guess it's the same approach as us in a friend setting. And we take this approach in any conversations that we are fully immersed into the person's environment, really immersed of what is this person talking about? Where is he coming from? And try to understand and write that questions like what you say, take your approach, write what he says to question him. Am I right? Do I make
Sure.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. That while you're talking about that, the other thing that came through my mind is also when you're with friends or when you get into a coaching session. I think there's a little bit of formality and informality that actually switches in that conversation itself. So informality, you're just talking about anything, kind of like doesn't make sense, and you're just talking about it, you're gossiping and stuff like that. And then you could switch and come back into formal and say, all right, how's your life and how's work with you, and then you try to zoom in on work, and then you come back and you talk about something else on an informal basis. So there's a constant switching between formality and informality in terms of what you're trying to share with the other individual. I'm not sure if I'm making sense, and I think that's really important when you're talking about a platonic relationship. Okay, but if you're talking about coaching where you're trying to coach someone, or someone's got a problem that you're trying to understand, then probably I think it's going to be really important to be fully engaged, vested into that individual, provided you want to be vested in that. Again, I think it's really important, maybe, is to understand the fact that you can't be always turned on as a coach, right? Sometimes we are just exhausted. We are mentally exhausted. We are physically exhausted. We probably don't have the capacity to want to dial in terms of what the person is saying. And you know what? Sometimes people don't even want to think. I'm too tired. I already had a long day. Please don't ask me this question. Can we switch topics? Right? Can we go to something else? I think these are all the different scenarios that could possibly come about. But again, it's how comfortable two individuals feel about each other, whether they feel safe, whether they feel trustworthy, whether they feel vulnerable to be able to talk about it. I'm sure that helps a lot. I'm not sure if that's making sense to Tony. Maybe Tony can ask us more questions so that we can dial into what he's looking for also.
Right. Yeah. Tony, feel free. And every one of you who is out there, feel free to drop us a questions and we will answer along the way. Now, writing on to that, Raymond. Okay. And what you are saying is correct. We as a coach, we cannot be always in our coaching hats, right? So
Mm.
sometimes we have to be in our normal selves and we get tired. But let me pose another situations. For example, someone that you're talking and it kinds of laments on what he's going through that day and he talks the issue over and over and over again whenever he and you meet. Okay, and it's not in coaching conversation, it's in our daily conversations per se. So let me ask you, what if that someone, that individual, and because you unknowingly put on your coaching hat and you start asking questions and that person gets very frustrated and say, Mavis, I'm too tired. Can you not ask me any more questions?
Right,
Right. So
right.
I believe that comes to a point where we implement the approach of silence. Because in my previous episodes, one of the coach was saying, silence is also a coaching technique.
Mm, mm. Yeah, right. Silence is such a powerful tool in terms of coaching. And I use silence to allow the other person to contemplate, to reflect on answers itself. I think the other thing I wanted to also mention, Mavis, which I think is really important, is the fact that we don't always be coaches. Sometimes people just want to rant, and we give them that opportunity to rant. And it's funny you mentioned that, Mavis, but I've caught myself so many times where it's a job hazard, where I suddenly come out with a question, and the person looks at me and said, "Are you trying to coach me?" You know, and I said, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry." Immediately, I think we need to understand when we step in with that coaching head, and when it's okay not to coach, and it's okay to rent in together with that person. So, in other words, find the right time when you should coach, and also, make sure that you're not coaching all the time, because people will find it. People will find, and I'm telling you, sometimes people they don't like it. They don't like it.
Mm.
I know when people don't like it. It's like when they point at me and say, "Are you trying to coach me?" And immediately it catches me and says, "Oh, oops! I think I've got my coaching. Hang on, I'm sorry. Let me throw that off. All right, share with me more. What else you want to share with me?" So I think that's a really important thing for us to remember.
Right. Okay. So, Raymond, can we explore a little bit? So now we have talked for the last 15, 20 minutes really on the topic of how we bring coaching conversations into our lifestyle, right? Now, let me actually look at it in another perspective. Okay, if you don't mind, Raymond, maybe share with us because both of us are coaches. Okay, perhaps you can share with the audience, like, is it is it that all these coaching conversations we know that it brings impactful positive change to the person's mindset, growth, etc. Okay, and we're trying to put in tips on how this person wants to grow and can catch on coaching conversations into their lifestyle. But do you think, like us coaches, when do you think we can come in,
But can we what?
professionally? When do
All
you
right.
think someone needs to seek coaches' help?
Right. I like to answer that question by asking a question. What's the purpose of coaching? Right. So, what is the real purpose of coaching? To me, Mavis, coaching is a conversation. That's what
Mm.
it is. Right. And as long as you are willing to have a conversation without formally saying, "All right, guys, let's start coaching," right? But just being able to merge into a coach, flow into a conversation, and not even realize that you're trying to coach or someone else is trying to coach you, and then flow out and then move away from it. One of the things that we try to do with organizations is we always talk about check-ins, right?
Mm.
Checking in with people. Coaching formalities says that you got to sit down 45 minutes, 60 minutes, sit down and have a proper conversation with them. But checking in is also a conversation, aka a mini coaching session, right? And I think it's really important for us to not differentiate coaching from conversations, and trying to find a balance or a blend between both of them, so that the conversations become a little bit more productive, directional, outcome based towards what those two individuals are trying to gain. Does that make sense to you, Mavis?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So that's when, coaches like us professionally, when we come in with an outcome, we come in with a productive outcome, right? I truly resonate and believe that coaching is a conversation and
Hmm.
evolves conversations, right? So every minute we are all involved in conversations one way or another, and we share stories, experiences, advice, communicating who we are, correct?
Hmm.
And most of our times, um, our thoughts per se are sparked with ideas or even more deeper thoughts as we move on into conversations. Because when we are deep in thoughts, we ask questions. right? And the more questions we have, the more we find it difficult to answer. So that's why coaches like us, we come in to mirror those questions in a challenging and yet different perspectives. So, like how to say, coaching conversations can be a need not be very distinctly formally or informally. Can be a normal conversations, right? Like what we have said for the last 1 hour or so, we were trying to say how can we inject coaching conversations into our lifestyle. So, and how that differentiate, or maybe I would say not differentiate, but when do people come to coaches is to seek a productive outcome. Am I right? Do I make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I think that's a pre-conversation to a coaching conversation, right? So you
Right.
have a pre-conversation. Do we want to take this into the sphere in the space of coaching itself? And if there's no necessity to do that, then don't even do that. And that's why we have all these pre-conversations, the pre-contracts before going into coaching, which I think is really important.
Yes, definitely. So that's when how we actually distinguish. Sometimes coaching can be informal, and sometimes when we want to do a productive session, that's when we come to coaches.
Right.
Right. So we have come. Unfortunately, we have. I mean, not unfortunately, but we have come 9 p.m. already, and I've
That's
told
amazing.
everyone. Yeah, we are going to actually be closing off at 9 p.m. sharp. And thanks everyone for coming by. I hope you guys have gained, some understandings of how you can inject coaching conversations into your lifestyle. Be it whether you're a coach or not. You never know how you gain how you gain that skills to ask the powerful questions can help your friends, your people around you, and that is considered coaching conversations, right? So that's what we are trying to, help to educate and spread awareness within this 1 hour to help every one of you. And thank you for all of you, Sasim, James, Ian, Anjan. We have Johnny, and we have JC Kok Fong. And we have Daryl, our dear friend. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today's session. And I really hope that you all have gained a special session today. And I'm really pretty sure that today's session was nothing of any of other sorts of every session is the same. I mean, every session is special, I would say. I can't believe 9 p.m. has just passed. Right.
Yeah, it's amazing. But thank you so much for having me on today to talk about injecting coaching lifestyle. And if anyone's got questions, they can send you the questions, and I'm sure we could draft a response to them.
Yes, definitely. We can even have they draft in our post and whatsoever, we can always answer. Thanks, James, for coming by. And he says, thanks, Mavis and Raymond, for a great session. Right. Okay. Now, thank you so much once again, Raymond. Most grateful for having you here on today's sessions, and we have so much because I've seen you facilitating conversations and you're so great at all these coaching conversations, and that's why I actually probed the topic, shall we do injecting coaching lifestyle. Once again, thank you, Raymond, for coming on board today, and I believe that many of us have gained a lot of understandings, a lot of nuggets, and then we can bring forth to our next conversation tomorrow, and they can start coaching everyone tomorrow. Now, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned to next week episode number 18. Okay, I'm slowing down because we're going to have a very special conversation with a very special lady who is not a HR professional, who is not a coach, no other persons like any other people that have come on board for the last 17 episodes. Okay, and I shall say this, and I'm going to stop you for you to ponder who is coming. Come join us next week if you want to know. Okay, good night, everyone. I'll see you guys online, offline. Bye, guys. Good night. Thank
Good night.
you.
Bye bye.